Hello, everyone, and welcome to Of Mushrooms and Men, a Last of Us podcast. I am one of your hosts, the CultureCast host, Chris Dashu, and I'm joined by my good friend. She's not going to be doing any dragon noises, but there are noises in the show that you could be doing your own imitation of. My friend and yours, the former, I guess, current, still host of Game of Bros, House of the Dragon podcast. You're a friend of mine, Yashar.
I'm gargling some shiitake mushrooms in my throat.
You're gargling mushrooms? This just got very sexual very fast. I'm just gargling all these mushrooms.
Gargling all these mushrooms. I want to have a kiss, like
a mycelium kiss, as mouth to mouth mycelium love,
like Tess got, like just a little peck.
And if you're here, we're going to be talking about the second episode of HBO's latest adaptation series of a pre-existing property. We'll be talking about the second episode of The Last of Us TV show. That episode is titled Infected. So the episode is directed by Neil Druckmann. Yes, Neil Druckmann, the creator of one of the co-creators of the video game, and it is written once again by Craig Mazin, who we have talked about before. This episode is once again all about Joel and Tess and Ellie. Well, what are they doing? They're making their way through the out of the QZ towards something, towards the people that they're taking Ellie to the people that they're supposed to take her to. I'm not going to lie to you. This was kind of a bummer of an episode because I really was a tad disappointed. Felt like it kind of didn't do. I know why this episode was the way that it was, but not a lot happened, like in a rather surprising way, given how much given the speed of which everything happened in the first episode. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, well, the first episode really ramps up a lot, and this episode obviously is also actually quite close to the game. Like the major story beats, it's almost identical. And like Tess dies early in the game, and it's less about like the plot moving, and I think about it's quite important to understand why Joel continues, because it's basically in her honor. Because at this point, he's still closed off from the rest of the world, and I think this helps us see that. Like it can't all be in vain, I guess, and that keeps Joel going. So like the episode, starts off with them leaving the QZ. You see them finally see a clicker, which is essentially an infected that's been infected for like years. And it's not just like your angry person. And through that, Tess gets bitten and basically puts like final hurrah to protect Joel and Ellie and give them a clear escape and continue their journey westward when, the other Fireflies have all been infected and died. So
that's the entire episode almost, other than the opening.
That's the entire episode. And yes, and then the opening was interesting to me because I don't know if they're doing these cold opens every episode.
But I hope they do, because these cold opens are... Well, and you know what? This, for me, is the influence of Craig Mazin, almost like explicitly, because you know what it feels like, and I know you're going to agree, it feels like Chernobyl being injected into this show in a lot of ways. The best parts of Chernobyl, for me at least, the parts of Chernobyl that I appreciate, the kind of investigative, like, what's going on, we don't know what's going on, but we the audience know what's going on, but the people in the world don't, and seeing them come to that realization, I think for me is very interesting.
No, it was interesting because like I don't know how you felt about it, but in the games it's taken like generally a pretty American centric stance. And so it was cool to see like how this impacted outside of the scope of what we've interacted with as players or consumers of even the first episode. And the other interesting thing was, I don't even know if it's ever been stated that like they basically bombed all the cities. Like the cities were all fucked up, but I just always assumed in the games it's because, I don't know, society has collapsed. But that was like really, it puts into context why all the cities are so fucked basically in the games, and like the buildings are collapsing and things like that. And when like that woman, the doctor, she's just like, the Indonesian lady is just like, bomb it all. Like you just felt, and she was just like, she had just resigned herself and a lot of other people to dying, because that was the only way she knew how to stop this thing, which we have no cure for. And it was really impactful. Like, and even in that short amount of time, you felt like almost like an emotional connection with her. And
it's one of those things where this woman is just having a normal day, and that is the thing that I appreciate. And you kind of see it. It's echoed here as it was in the first episode. You're just going about your day, and then all of a sudden the world is different, and you see that with Joel and his daughter in the first episode where, that seemingly just a normal day, going to work, going to school, whatever, come home, and then the world goes to shit. Same thing here. This woman is just, having lunch with some friends, and all of a sudden this military officer shows up and says, "Hey, I need you to look at this thing." And, it's world changing, like you said. And when she says just bomb the city, it's like, oh my God, like this is, it puts into perspective the stakes here, but also, and then this is just me, like this needs to feel a little less like just zombies. And some of this feels a little too just zombie-ish for me. Because the story of Last of Us the game, the amount that I played the first 2.5 hours, it did kind of feel like a zombie game, right? And I was worried with this show, as I know you were kind of concerned, like, is this show going to do enough to justify its existence and also not just be a zombie adjacent show? And I think it is, but it's also doing some things that are, I guess, giving people that wouldn't have any other frame of reference some frame of reference. I just don't need it. I understand that other people do, but me personally, I don't. But the people that do, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's probably the people that have no prior exposure to the source material.
But did you not find it a bit like tragic that not only did she say bomb it, but we also know like it didn't work?
Well, but that's the thing that I appreciate about post-apocalyptic fiction is that the best intentions of people normally fall short. And I love that because, again, it just goes, I think it just shows the kind of the fatalistic nature of nature, right? Like nature doesn't give a shit. Nature gives no fucks, frankly, to the point where, again, they make some changes in the narrative to the way that the clickers and the fungal infection works. Because in the game, it's not explicit that like stepping on a fungus alerts the fungus, right?
Yeah. So I actually listened to, they have a official Last of Us podcast where they interview. Have you listened to that one?
I watched they talk about it in the after the show as well. The same thing.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I'm sure that actually they probably just take it. So Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann talking to Troy Baker, who plays Joel in the game, and they said like that was, I think, Craig Mazin's idea, and Neil Druckmann was like, we didn't even like think about it, and he's like, it totally makes sense. Like this is they're all kind of connected, and it does up the stakes because it's not like you can't just kill one and move on. Right. Like if they're all, everyone's not connected to everyone, but like in certain areas they're connected. You have to be very careful. And it definitely, like these little flourishes, I think, raise the stakes, but also give you a little bit more to think about as far as like the infection goes, even if you're familiar with the source material. And I really appreciate it. Like they're not trying to reinvent the wheel on any of this stuff, but I feel that all of the additions, like the cold opens and the infected being more of like a hive mind, these little changes and tweaks have made it a more compelling vision. And I think going from driving the story, playing a game, to a passenger, like it's just a different experience. And I think it's one that it's working in the context of the show. And I know you said you felt bored because maybe a lot didn't happen. And I hesitate to use the word filler because part of me is like, this is what happened in the game. But yes, relative to the last episode, which is also like 30 minutes longer, not as much happens. But I also think the first episode is probably not a fair barometer of how much story to expect.
No, I agree.
To consume in every episode.
I agree with you there. I mean, again, I wasn't bored in as much as it felt very much like a video game in a lot of ways. Yeah. Like they're in this building for half of the episode, and then they're out of the building, and there was a cutscene at the end. Again, that's the source material. That's the influence of the source material. That's the way the source material told the story. Because I did get this far in the game. I mean, I got effectively, I think, to where we're going to be, where we end here, I think is where I got in the game. And like you said, the difference between driving it and being a passenger are apparent. And it's even apparent in the way that they address kind of the clickers, because in the game, one clicker is a threat, right? You can die to just one clicker. This is not Uncharted where it takes several people to take down, Nathan Drake. In the game, you die from one, right? Like it's pretty easy to the point where you need to be. It's Dark Souls-esque in a way, right? Like there's very little room for error. If you get into a fight with someone, you need to kill them because you're going to die otherwise. Yeah, I mean, because you have the regular infected, which you can usually take, like, you can kind of fight a bit. But a clicker, if they get you and you have no weapon, you're in the game, you're toast. Like it's showing you they're a much more powerful version, but obviously the trade-off is they no longer have their vision. Right.
So you can sneak by them, which I think they showed effectively. And I like that they used practical effects and they used like real actors making the fucking weird moves. And I mean, that shit was creepy. Did you think it looked good?
I was gonna say, like, again, I think that there is no way they could have done this show up close digitally and it be convincing. I just don't. I mean, again, as good as House of the Dragon has been, I just don't think that clickers up close CGI would have worked. The practical effects, again, I think that this is going to be echoed a lot in the show. Like, they have a really good starting point. If you have a really good script to work off of, your movie, unless you really fuck it up, is going to be pretty solid. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. Like, the game here is the script that the show is working from. And so the design of the creatures is more or less the same as it is in the show. Like, and again, with graphics as good as they are on the PS3 and the PS4 and now the PS5, because given this is a 3-generational game at this point, it looks like the game, which I appreciate. They didn't need to do more than just be the game. That's the thing. Like, and again, I'm struggling really hard with this because I was talking with some people over the weekend and they were like, should I watch this show? And I was like, well, do you like zombie shows? And they're like, I'm kind of soft on zombie shows. And do you like post-apocalyptic stuff? I'm soft on post-apocalyptic stuff. And it's like, well, then this show's not going to be for you. And like, because I'm waiting for them to give me more of Joel and Ellie, because like that is the core of this show. It is not about the clickers and everything else. It's about them, right? And you know that, and I know that, and I'm waiting for the show to get to the point, and I think the next episode, more or less, we're going to be there.
Yeah.
But the core of the game is Joel and Ellie and their interaction and their interactions with one another and playing off of one another and playing off the other characters in the world. And you're right, Tess and Joel and Ellie, anytime they're doing anything together on screen, interacting, is really good. It's really compelling because, shockingly, Anna Torv, Pedro Pascal, and Bella Ramsey are all fantastic actors. But the other stuff does just kind of feel like the video game. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, I get why this show exists, but at the same time, you know what I mean? It's just going to be a hard podcast to do and a hard show to talk about because the video game is so good. It's not like the video game is bad. It's not like they said, well, this is a good idea, but it's poorly executed there. It's a good video game that's almost so good it is a movie. Like, I'm still struggling a little bit.
You were all in on the first episode.
I know, and I'm still all in. It's just I'm struggling because, I don't know, something is rubbing me the wrong way. I don't know what it is.
You feel like something's been torn out of your heart?
Yeah, wow. I really like Anna Torv. I wish she was in more stuff.
Yeah, she was great. I feel like the trio of them is interesting because it's like Joel, we know he's like super closed off since his daughter died and he's had to do a bunch of like just really fucked up things to survive. And Tess is similar, but you can see that like there is more of a softness and, more of an optimist. Like she's like, even if Bella or Ellie's not, the solution, she gets us what we want. And like, that's something that's worth fighting for. And she kind of softens Joel enough to where he's, for the first time, I think in a long time, willing to let someone in.
Right.
And I think we're going to see that piece by piece by piece. Like that's obviously where the show's heading towards. So we haven't seen that at all from him. Like he's like, I'm here to do a job, basically. And I think Tess's sacrifice at the end of the episode is what's going to flip that switch in him. And so to your point, like if you want to see that, I think, from now on, like we're going to be seeing a lot of that because I mean, that has to happen.
Right.
Because otherwise the story like doesn't make sense and her sacrifice is in vain. And we see like Joel early on is like ready to just kill Ellie. And he doesn't really believe that she's immune, even though like he sees the evidence and he's just not willing to be okay with that.
Honestly, and this is going to sound really terrible, but I kind of just I'd like to see the Last of Us world without seeing Joel and Ellie and just see all the other stuff. Like a show that's just the stuff that we see. Like, here's the problem.
Chris, keep watching. You will get your spinoffs. If we get enough viewers. I promise. We talked about this last week.
I know, but like, that's the thing. I'll tell you, like, the most compelling stuff in this show so far has been the stuff with John Hannah. And has been the stuff at the beginning of this episode because it's stuff we've never seen before. Like I know the narrative enough to know where this is going. I've never seen any of this additional stuff. And it's so interesting and weird to see because like you could do a whole show, a whole season about what was happening in this like flour factory in Jakarta in Indonesia, and the people that are about to have their lives, torn apart by, I guess, them bombing the city. Like,
yeah.
I really like the world that they've created, and I understand that this is a very small corner of the world that we're in. And like you said, yeah, if this is successful, who knows what else we'll get. But they've almost done too good of a job of giving me the world outside of the world that we're in, and I want to see everything that happened. Not that I care about how things happen, because like you said, everything was a failure. We see that now. The cities are destroyed. They're bombed out. People are turned into mushroom people, whatever. But that story, for whatever reason, that's compelling to me, and I want to see more of that. Because, like, for me, that's just that it's Chernobyl with a different kind of threat.
Yeah. Have you seen the show Station 11? I think you would like that, because that actually goes a lot of back and forth. It's about like a pandemic, not zombies, but like an infectious disease. And like you go back and forth between a 20-year timeline, and you see like how society collapsed. And then you see like the present day, which it's not great, less fucked up than Last of Us, but it's not a great situation. I actually think you'd really like that show. And like, it has one of the most beautiful finales I've ever seen. So it's also an HBO show, Station 11. So check it out if you get a chance. If the first episode, I think, is pretty, like, gets you all in, like similar to Last of Us. So,
but do you see where I'm coming from though? Like,
yeah.
it is so good and compelling, and like I'm not going to blame Craig Mazin for being good at what he does, because he's very good at what he does. Seemingly, like, not going to say like one thing, but definitely like a kind of thing he is very good at.
He's good with I think the like almost the dissecting of like a bureaucracy, right? Like he takes this thing that's like these things that historically seem almost impenetrable, like the people on top know all the answers. Then he shows us, actually, let's spend a little bit more time with them. And they're just like us. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. They're scared. They're lost. And these are the people that are making huge decisions. And like Chernobyl was all about that, right? And this got us a little bit more into that. And now I think he's trying to get with like the Joel and Ellie a bit more into the human aspect of it. But yeah, I can see why that's interesting. Speaking of policy, did you notice how this post-apocalyptic world has slightly stricter gun regulations than the current USA? They would not let a 14-year-old Ellie have a gun.
Which I don't understand.
Yeah, but I was watching that. I was like, dude, I'm pretty sure it's easier for a 14-year-old to get a gun like at Walmart right now.
Well, I don't understand why they wouldn't let her have a gun. Like, I'm sorry, guys, but like,
that was
and the thing is, like, the threat in the show, I think, does do a good job at like meeting what the threat is in the video game. Like, they only run into 2 clickers. That's it. Like,
and you see, like, that's enough to fuck things up.
I mean, that's enough to get both Tess and Ellie bit again. Like,
yeah.
I appreciate that the show is doing a very good job of showing us kind of the immediacy of the threat and the scope of the threat. The shot of the mushrooms all kind of waking up together, I think, is a really compelling thing, because it leads us into an interesting direction with the show, which is, there is a threat, the cordyceps, and there is a cure, or someone who is not able to be infected with Ellie. I wonder if the show will actually have an ending. Like, because like I'm wondering if the reason they've made some of these changes is to give themselves like a viable way to end the show. Because that's the thing. Video game doesn't have an ending yet, right?
Well, the first game
until it does, right?
The first game has an ending. I hated the ending, but I think not to get spoiled, but I do think, like, looking back at it, like I hated it, but I think I hated it because it was actually quite well written, and I'm interested to see if they follow that. I guess as they will, but
like introducing something that's a singular thing that is controlling everything is a little Night King-esque is more what I'm getting.
Well. But I didn't get that it's like one. It's
I know,
like,
but I know, but you know what I mean.
It's like sectional. Yeah.
I know, but you know what I mean. Like even if it's sectional, it still gives the writers kind of an out if they want to have a way to destroy the threat.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like a single, like, oh, this is the alpha cordyceps or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
See what I mean? Again, I don't think they're going there, but again, But at the same time, like they've already planted those seeds. No pun intended.
Yeah. They've kissed us gently with their tentacles.
Okay, let's talk about that. Little corny, little kind of cheesy, right? Like, I get it, but
so speaking of Neil Druckmann, so I listened to them talk about that kiss, and his point was at that point, Tess had essentially submitted herself. She wasn't fighting back.
Right.
So it was like almost saying, like, I don't need to be aggressive to you. I'm just going to like give it to you. I mean,
as she's trying to light a lighter to blow them all up.
Yeah. I think it probably was a bit for like shock value. Like, this is weird and like very
it's
like
gross. Like the mycelium sticking out of the guy's mouth. Like it's nasty. Like
it's gross.
It's not being shown because it's pleasant to look at, but correct me if I'm wrong. In the game, they have tentacles, right? They don't have the mycelium coming out of their mouth.
Yeah, the mycelium doesn't come out of the mouth. No, that's more of like a new thing. I think they just bite you. But the mycelium out of the mouth is quite gross, and they got some good mileage out of it. Also, the opening in the cold open too, when the woman opens the where she's doing the autopsy on the infected person.
Man, what a horrifying thing for that doctor to walk into that room and there's just like a mushroom person sitting on a.
How does the casting go for that? It's like, yo, you want to just be like a naked dead mushroom person in Indonesia?
I guess.
You're like, yeah, there's snacks. I'm in.
What's the SAG minimum?
Yeah. Do I get healthcare?
I wonder, and you know what I wonder? I wonder if they're going to do these cold opens every episode. I kind of feel like they're going to, right?
Yeah. Not the first episode. I was like, oh, they're just trying to switch it up.
Set the scene.
Something a little new. Yeah, set the scene. And now I see this. I'm like, maybe we will. Maybe not every episode, but I feel confident in saying this probably isn't the last cold open we're getting.
Yeah,
I think especially like it kind of sets the place. Like we were out in the world where it was quite destroyed, and Ellie talks about the bombs and stuff, and so this sets the context for that. So I can see it. It's probably going to be loosely connected to something that's occurring within the episode,
and that's what I was going to say. Like it kind of is reflective of the themes of the episode. With like let's just again because Anna Torv by the end of the episode is burning everything down to give them an opportunity to leave. I mean, she's burning Joel's old life away, herself included, to give him an opportunity. And like you said, that's effectively what they do. Again, bombing the cities is not like that's not effective either. Like, I mean, I get it, but that's the thing. Like, I think to your point, like, I do really like that the show doesn't stray away from showing like, and kind of has already shown like this breakdown in the bureaucracy and societal kind of like the societal way we live. And like, I like that it is no problem showing it. I wish it had shown more of it. I kind of wish it had given us more time in the QZ. I mean, I know in the game, they spend a little bit of time in the QZ. It's not just like 5 minutes and you're out. You're hanging around there for like an hour. I mean, there's again, I know that this isn't that story, but because it's not that story and they have to get to where they're going, it feels like some opportunities to maybe flesh out the world a little bit more are kind of getting ignored. And I get why they're getting ignored. The story between Ellie and Joel is compelling, but I mean, you have this opportunity and you have the world the sandbox that you can play in. It's kind of too bad that it's just this one corner that we're being stuck in, but like, it's still a pretty interesting corner.
No, I think it makes sense. Like you want to see more of, almost like how the sausage is made for everyone. Whereas like, that's not really what, at least The Last of Us is about. It's about the relationship, these two people, these like, one fundamentally broken person and one person who I want to remind you, has never seen the world before. Like she was raised in this dystopia.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like and in like a QZ and she was also in the orphanage, and they kind of hint at the DLC, which when they ask her like, who's she in the mall with, like that's
from the DLC, right?
I kind of think we're going to get an episode that is about that. That's my theory.
I mean, I don't know how they couldn't, given that ends up like amending a lot of the character in the DLC. Like it, not that it amends it, but it like fleshes her out in a way that changes her a little bit, puts into context what she was doing in the first game.
You find out like how she got bitten and her relationship and a bit more about her. And you kind of, I mean, when she asked, "Oh, your boyfriend?" Like there's little hints. There's little hints to it.
It's for the fans and the players of the game, but they're gonna have to address it in the show.
Yeah. And like Riley,
which is weird, right? Because like most of the time that's just like wink, wink, nod, nod type thing. But like this is like, it is a wink, wink and a nod, nod if you know, but like they are going to have to address it because it's the second biggest part of her character behind her interactions with Joel.
Yeah, I mean, and we learn more about like, and it informs a lot of her decisions in the second game, which would be, I guess, season 2. So
maybe again, I don't even know, because again, like the second game is its own can of worms, right? Like,
yeah, I mean the second. Yeah, but the Neil Druckmann has said like the first season is going to be the first games, and
right. But what is the second season? But is the second season its own? Because again, there's plenty of time in between the first and second game, where Joel and Ellie are doing whatever the fuck. I mean, that's the thing. That's what I'm getting at here. It's like, while I appreciate that the video game does exist and the video game has set the story and the boundaries for the story, we don't need to hew identical to the game. I appreciate that people want that, but like, these characters are fully formed, well fleshed out, fully realize you can put them into any situation as long as it's believable within this universe. And I think it would be entertaining. And I'm not sure that the video game players are going to get all bent out of shape, because again, they're going to be seeing something they haven't seen before and they didn't get to interact with.
I kind of think there's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like,
I know. Like, that's the problem here, right?
I actually think if they like strayed too far, people would be like, oh, like, why didn't you let Tess die and sacrifice herself? And why is she still alive?
I think they need to follow the big beats, but I don't think they need to follow the big beats and the small beats and the minute beats as well. And they're not. I mean, again, we're getting opening intro cold opens that are never in the game. Frankly, the game could have benefited from having the cold open that the last episode did at the beginning of the game. You could totally imagine that being in the video game. Like, cuts, the way it's like, oh, and careful if it'll happen, and then cut to the music in The Last of Us. Like, there you go. I don't know. It's just like you said, they're damned if they don't do it, and they're damned if they do it too closely. Like, it's a fine line they're having to tread here.
But they just they also did do the thing where, like, they not completely, but they've changed a pretty substantial fact about like how the infected work.
Right.
So there's little changes that I think can pay off later on, and we're still really early in the story. And I'm interested to see, like, I actually don't really feel like I understand Ellie a lot. Like, she's like a sarcastic smartass, and she's pretty brave. But I'm not sure if I buy her yet.
Right.
To be honest,
I'm with you. No, I'm with you.
I think Bella Ramsey's performance has been okay. I don't think I've loved it, but I think we're going to get a lot more of her. And I'm part of me there's part of me thinks she's almost trying too hard, and not her herself, but like the dialogue and the way she interacts with them is like she's always just trying to be like the funniest, most sarcastic person. Cutesy. Yeah. And I wonder, like I said, that kind of goes back to my point on her growing up in this. Like, she's never really seen normalcy. So maybe it's how she copes. Like, when she's making fun of the clickers and they're just like, stop, like, don't even like joke like that. It's an interesting dynamic, and one I'm willing to see more of. I haven't been completely enraptured by her character.
I'm with you. And you know what? I actually don't think, now that we've seen kind of more of her and actually her opportunity to interact with Pedro Pascal, I think Bella Ramsey's fine. She just, I feel bad for her as an actress because she's 19, but she looks like she's 10.
Well, she's supposed to be 14.
I know, but she's 19. Like, she doesn't look 19 either. I'm not sure she looked 14, but I feel like the character of Ellie is such a weird thing to approach anyways, because like, we don't know enough about her in the show yet to really even have an opinion, right? Like, we need an Ellie episode, and the DLC feels like a prime thing where they could just have an entire episode being flashing back to that and talking about that entire relationship that she has and all that. Like, that all is going to be an episode, right? Like, there's no way that it's not.
I think that it's probably is like, my guess is close to the later season. But yeah. Now that there's no more Tess, it's basically just going to be her and Joel, and then generally people that don't want or things that don't want the best for them.
Right.
And with the introduction of that, like the hive mind type of thing, I wonder if that's going to be a reason why they avoid a lot more firefights. Like, we're in a video game, a lot of times you do go even guns first because you're just like, I want to shoot shit, right? But now that we know that any type of offensive action they take can be not just the immediate clickers or infected, but can actually alert others, I think we're going to see them generally take the stealthy approach, which means that it's probably not going to be super action focused, is my guess.
Right. Which, I mean, theoretically, the kind of canonical way you would play the game, and the only way you can play the game, you can't run and gun in the game. It's not a run and gun game.
Mean, you can run a gun. There's definitely parts where you could run a gun or sneak, but yeah, the game overall kind of nudges you to be, because you have limited ammo. Like your items break after like 3 swings.
Right. It's a game about scarcity, right? So they're not having full-on firefights.
And actually, the areas where you are more likely to have firefights are like when you're actually fighting like people, like,
right,
marauders or whomever.
Which we will clearly see at some point in this show, obviously.
Yeah, we haven't really seen bad people. Like we've seen Joel's like a scoundrel in Tess, and even the guy that kidnapped Tess, but we haven't seen like truly like monstrous people yet.
Is Joel, and that's the thing though, is Joel a scoundrel? Like, again, like they paint, it's really weak, right? Like they don't want to make him actually a bad guy. And I think in the video game, it's more shades of gray. Right now, it's like, it's just Pedro Pascal, and he's too lovable to hate, even if he's being the most dastardly bad guy he can be, which I'm not sure he has been yet in his career. He always plays characters that everybody finds a reason or way. Oberyn Martell,
Wonder Woman 1984.
I didn't see that movie because it's bad, and it's bad.
It's bad. It's bad, but his performance is like kind of insane.
Sure, but like, okay, so his one thing, but he's still, people, you like him because it's still, he's lovable because he's Pedro Pascal. Yeah. That's the thing. Like, I kind of feel like, again, I'll go back to what I said before. Like, they should have cast somebody else because he's just too damn likable for me to ever not just implicitly like him. Even if it's like you said, he at the first episode, he takes a child's body and he sets it in a fire. Yeah, but like, what other choice did he have?
He did murder like a cop.
The cop was pointing a gun at him, was going to shoot him.
No, he wasn't. He was going to take it back to the.
It's the dystopia, baby.
I will say, if it's going to be interesting to see like your reaction to how the season ends, if they go to like making him more likable, because in the game he does get quite likable as well,
right? Of course, I think, as he kind of should, right? I guess,
which I think makes it more jarring. So just I'd say just hold on to that feeling of you're struggling to hate him or feel like any negative.
I'm feeling like the show is meaning to make us not like him, and no matter what it does, it really can't, because it's Pedro Pascal. That's what I'm saying.
I mean, yeah, but he was also willing to shoot Ellie, and Tess is like, "Yo, chill."
How much do we actually believe he's going to do it, though?
Well, he would. In the context of if Tess wasn't there, he would have. But I guess us knowing enough about like the source material and the show, there's no real stakes there, because obviously he has to deliver Baby Yoda, Grogu. I mean,
the mushroom Malorian, dude. I was joking about that earlier with a friend of mine. He's like, "How is The Last of Us?" And I was like, I mean, at this point, it's kind of the Mandalorian, like with Bella Ramsey in place of Grogu. Like, you need to take this one really important person across Tatooine, across the United States, across whatever, and it's like, all right, and so the wolf and cub. I mean, any journeying across the wasteland story, a boy and his dog. Like, there you go. Like, it's not anything new.
You're a guy with a sketchy past who doesn't play by the rules. The last thing you want is a kid with you.
Exactly.
But you know what? They just stole your heart. And you're going to do whatever you can to protect them.
Including, but not limited to, sacrificing yourself, sacrificing your livelihood, or sacrificing parts of your body. Like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, but that's the thing. Like, the narrative of the story is not anything particularly unique. It's two people going across the United States on kind of a cross-country journey. But it's the trappings, right? And I don't know, like...
It's the road.
Yeah. Don't compare this to the road, please. This wishes it could be half as good as anything Cormac McCarthy has ever written. Okay, like as good as Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann are. That Viggo if Mortensen you want to watch
Joel. Viggo Mortensen,
but that's
Joel.
what I.
Let's
but,
go.
But that's
Let's
what I.
Go.
But that is exactly what I fucking mean. This should have been that. This should have been like that. Because that's what the game's promise is. That's what the game's letting you do in a lot of ways, is act out your most brutal, fatalistic ways of dealing with things. It's putting you in this position and saying, would you do what it takes to survive when the options to survive are pushing you to your breaking point? And the question is, are we going to see that in this show, or is the show going to stray away from doing that because that's not particularly palatable? It's more palatable, I feel like, for people who play video games than it is for people who consume film media.
Yeah, but I still think it's too early. And to what you were saying about him being too likable, he also really hasn't we haven't interacted with anyone outside. Like, he's not going to kill Ellie. He's not going to kill Tess.
Right.
Like, so we haven't really seen him be threatened by a human yet.
Right. Yet. Well, other than the cop that he killed.
Yeah. And so, yeah. So the end of one we have is things don't go so well. So I think that it seems like you want a bit more of like a gruffness, like a lived in, like, this is a hard way to live and survive, and you have to do whatever you can to get by. And
I wanted to believe that we came back to. I want to feel like we came back to Joel after the time jump, and he had spent 20 years finding every reason to kill himself, but not because he can't bring himself to do it, or whatever guilt he feels. And honestly, when we came back to him in the first episode, it felt like nothing had happened and he had not done anything for 20 years, and he was the same character.
I don't think he's the same at all. He went from this guy that was like broken to he's just like, it's just a fucking kid's body in the van. I'll throw it. Like, he's completely closed himself off to feeling. Like,
I'm not getting that sense from the performance. I'm personally not. I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, again, like I said it. I've said it now several times. Like, Pedro Pascal, for me, I like him, but I just think like maybe someone else could have been that role. Even someone like Viggo Mortensen.
Mortensen.
And then I winked at you. Then I winked at you too.
Yeah, everyone,
so you know.
Yeah. Chris winked at me. That's how you know he's a good podcaster, when he only just does like facial expressions.
But it's only for your benefit. It's only for your benefit.
Yeah.
Look, I like Pedro Pascal. I think he's a very charismatic actor.
You like Pedro Pascal? I didn't get that.
But I just don't like him in this. I'm sorry.
So
maybe by the end of the season it'll have come around, but I feel like Troy Baker in the game and what he brings to the role, even though it is just voice and mocap, because I spent the last week going and watching clips from the game of that performance, and just, I don't know, maybe we'll get there by the end of the season, but his character doesn't feel as lived in as he does in the game. He doesn't feel as lived in a character. Like I said, it feels like when we come back in 2023, Joel, we're just back with him. There wasn't 20 years of anguish and turmoil. It's just, here he is again. And with a story like this, where it's all about the toll that this takes on you and the toll that it takes on your mental abilities or whatever, I wanted more of that. And again, like this show is not worried about showing you action. It is showing us character interactions almost this entire episode. There's no action in this show. There really hasn't been yet. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, the closest thing to action was probably the clicker sequence.
That's like, it's on any other show, that's not an action scene. Like here, it's as close as this show it has gotten so far, but I would contend that it's probably going to have to go further than this at some point, right?
Yeah.
But it's never going to go like full on Walking Dead.
Like I said, I could see it with some of the human elements potentially getting that. I don't think we're going to see him just like icing 100 clickers or anything like that.
Right. And that's what I mean. It's like the scope of this story, again, like I like that the scope of this story is smaller than a zombie story, but there is still a destroyed world outside of it.
Well, it's smaller in the context of, he's not killing just swaths and swaths of zombies,
right,
but the stakes are still big. Like, she is the potential cure to this thing that has ravaged society. And like, the only way to survive is in these not great, government run zones. And she's the way out. She is what the Fireflies are looking for, to say, hey, you don't need to be oppressed by Fedra. And she's the hope that Tess, was willing to sacrifice her life for. Tess was bitten, but she also was like, this girl is a way out. Because Joel even says, let's go home. And what does Tess say? She's like, that's not my home. Even though they've been there for like 20 years or however long. Like, Joel is resigned to an existence in where he lives out his days in the QZ and dies. Like, there is a reality right now that he does that. As long as his brother's okay. Tess, like, she does it because she has to. She doesn't like it. Like, she wants to feel something and feel hope again. And I think that we're going to see if that rubs off on Joel. And I think her sacrifice is going to ensure that he at least takes his task with Ellie much more seriously. And it's no longer about getting the car battery to get his brother. I mean, that's important, but it's really about taking this girl who her safety was the last wish of his essentially like lover, best friend. I know it wasn't explicitly stated, but in the game and in this, it was implied that if not at the current moment, they were romantic at some point. So yeah, I think it's going to make Joel a bit more human, but it sounds like your issue is you think he's too human already.
Well, I want to see, again, like I like Pedro Pascal, and I'll keep saying it. I like him a lot. It's just I have a hard time rooting against him because he's so goddamn charismatic and so charming and so likable. And I have a hard time saying, oh, he's a tortured soul, even if he's doing his best to convey that. It's just, again, we'll see. I think the show has 6-7 more episodes left. We have seen nothing of the show as far as I'm concerned. We won't even remember these episodes by the end of the series. By the end of the first season, we'll probably, remember when John Hannah was on the show? Oh, yeah, that was fun. But, this show still has so much ground to cover. It has Nick Offerman in the wings. It has all kinds of stuff.
I think next episode is Nick Offerman episode.
Yeah. So, like, it has so far to go that these are like minor complaints early on, but wouldn't be sitting here and talking about the show if I didn't voice some of my concerns, because, again, something like House of the Dragon, it had those concerns all the way. We mentioned the flash forwards being an issue, and they were an issue up until the end of that season. They totally were. We talked about them in the first episode. We talked about them in the last episode because they fucked up the narrative structure of that show. My only concern right now is kind of the way the characters are being characterized. I think the show, it's moving at a slow pace, but okay, I think it needs to, in a way. Like, I think people really need to understand the world that they're in and how different it is from a typical zombie kind of narrative, because it's not a zombie narrative. And people shouldn't be saying, oh, this is a zombie show, because it's not a zombie show.
Are you saying Pedro Pascal's expressiveness was better than Mandalorian? You liked his facial expression?
Oh yeah, show? He's so much better here. This is a much more intensive role for him. It's not just his body double the entire time.
I was like, at least he shows up to the set. Mandalorian, though, what a gig. I'm sure he gets paid buku money for
his voice
work a week. Yeah. Unreal.
I mean, to be fair, that show is good, but that show would not be nearly as big of a deal without Baby Yoda. He's fine, but Baby Yoda is the reason anybody is ever going to remember that show, because there was a whole summer where it was just the summer of Baby Yoda is what it felt like. And everything was Grogu.
Yeah.
But like
Hot Grogu summer.
I wonder what, I guess I kind of curious as to what Pedro Pascal, what he triggered in the writers of the show. Like, what was it that they saw in him? So
I think his vulnerability and like you said, there's almost like a hidden, I don't want to say gentleness, but like,
right.
There's this, oh yeah, I could trust this guy.
Right.
And I think, and I almost think you're coming at it like you're supposed to dislike him. I don't think you're supposed to dislike him.
No, I know that. But I think the show wants us to think that he's a little bit more complicated a character than he actually is. That's what I'm getting at. The show is just like, he's so troubled. And it's like, I guess, but he's just, quiet and fatalistic in a world where being fatalistic is what keeps you alive. Like, yeah, he wants to kill Ellie, but at the same time, yeah, it makes sense. Like, he's only gotten this far in life by not doing shit like this, right? Like you said, he's content to just live out the next 30 years of his life in the QZ. So, just kill her and move on. Like you said, what's the point when there is seemingly no hope?
And he even says at one point when she gets bitten again, because he thinks, oh shit, maybe this will turn her. He's like, let's just go back to the QZ. This is just not working to Tess. And she's like, well, they'll kill her, if we take her back. It's like, better them than us. And it also shows where his mind is like, he doesn't think there is enough where he would rather not. He doesn't mind if a child dies, but he'd rather not pull the trigger.
Right.
Which is, an interesting insight, I think. Like, he's willing to condemn a kid, but he would rather not get his hands dirty.
He's not passing the sentence.
Yeah.
Well, and again, like, I like the interplay between Pedro Pascal and Anna Torv. I knew the moment she was in the show that she had one episode, 2 max. And it's too bad because I think she plays really well off of Pedro Pascal and gives him someone interesting to bounce off of. And I know that we're going to see Nick Offerman and some other people throughout the rest of the series, but I don't know. I like Anna Torv a lot. I'm still a fan of Fringe and of Mindhunters. So never not going to complain when she's on screen, but I just wish she was in this more because she's a fantastic actress.
Wouldn't be surprised if maybe they do something off script and bring her back, maybe some flashbacks with Joel. Could see that.
I mean, why not, right? Again, when you have a storytelling medium where you've already shown that you're doing flashbacks, like why not? The original cold opening for this episode was actually going to be like showing Tess's son infected.
Yeah. She like I read about that. It was her husband and son were originally going to be infected, and she kills her husband, but I don't think she was able to kill her son or something like that. And then obviously you would know like that would completely fuck up a person.
Right.
And you would also understand why she would see Ellie as almost like a chance to do it again.
Right. Which I mean could have been interesting, but I mean, again, I don't think I need that explicitly to understand. No. You know, I think if the option are that cold open or the cold open we got, I'm going to take the cold open we got because I think it's like it's from another show, but it's a welcome kind of stylistic change to this show. I think that the cold open adds something to this show that these kinds of shows never tend to have, which is helping us understand the world at large. Like you said, because The Last of Us is an American story. To see that it's not just America, but the world, I think is helpful for me to understand the scope of the narrative.
And the fact that you like this so much, like I think you kind of need to watch Station 11.
I want to now.
Yeah.
Again, that's why I like Chernobyl. I mean, the first 10 minutes of this episode are just Chernobyl in this show. It really is. Like, that's why I loved Chernobyl so much. Is again, there's something for me that's interesting about that. I get that it's not for everybody. I understand that I like Zodiac a hell of a lot more than most people do.
Who hates Chernobyl?
I think some people find it boring. Just like people find Zodiac boring. Like, I don't think it's boring. I think it's just
are they Soviet sympathists?
I think it's just, you know, your expectation with the storytelling is there's got to be action and excitement and things happening, and characters just sitting and talking can be that. I think it can be interesting. And again, that's what the show is trafficking in this episode. It's really more about the three of them. We spend so much time with just the three of them talking. Yeah, and I'm okay with it. It's kind of a shock that it ground the progress of the show to a halt in the second episode, but I guess the game kind of does that anyways.
Yeah. Any last thoughts?
I'm dying over here. My nose is I'm so congested.
Is it cordyceps?
Yeah, I've got the mycelium in my nose. Well, I guess my final question to you is, in the game, it's spread by bites, right?
Yeah.
So in this, is it also spread by bites?
Yeah, it's bites. Okay. Or if the thing makes out with you, but I feel like that's the same as if it bit you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There are also in the game, there's spores, but they're very obvious. And if you breathe them in.
And she mentions that. Ellie mentions it.
And she did mention it in the
she
show?
said, aren't there things that explode and spores come out?
Oh, yeah. So, and then in the game, in those moments, Ellie would walk through without a mask, but Joel or whoever is in the scenes would wear like a gas mask.
Okay. So they're already kind of planting seeds. Maybe that's in the show. I mean, I'm assuming.
I'm sure it'll probably make an interesting visual at some point.
Right.
But it's not like, but it's quite obvious when that is. It's not like it's airborne everywhere. So yeah,
right.
Biting is the primary mode of spreading, which is also interesting because I'm like, you know, if it's not mostly airborne, then, you know, maybe the bombing could have worked. I don't know.
Right. Well, and also, again, I mean, you know, we talk about how do these things spread, and it being spread through bites, like
it's not the fastest mode of transmission.
No, and I feel like society, look, I'm not going to say we don't give ourselves enough credit because we just lived through a pandemic where I think we saw like the most fucking idiotic shit known to man happen. But at the same time, this is much different than that. And like, if people were running around in the streets, like eating people, I always have a hard time believing that society would break down that easily, that quickly, that fast.
With zombies?
Well, with anything, with zombies. But I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it just, I have a hard time believing it would fall apart that quickly.
I actually believe it, dude. Have you ever been to a concert? Or like where one thing goes wrong.
But that's a closed environment. We're talking about the world.
Yeah,
it would have to be something it would have to be something that has such a long gestation period that people would have to be able to get wherever they were going and then infect people that way. And this is not that either. Cordyceps isn't that either.
Well, yeah, it can say like if it like gets you on your leg or something, it could last 24 to 48 hours. So it's like you could be on a flight and then get to the new place and then.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess in the show we see people turn way quicker. You know, we see people, I don't know, like, again, it's hard to see them say it was 24 to 48 hours, but we see all these people just like turning seemingly out of nowhere. I don't know, like, I get it. Like, I agree with you.
We actually haven't seen many people turning.
No, we saw those people in the first episode, like the old lady.
Yeah, but who knows how long she'd been infected
Well, there's a point where the girl is standing there and the old lady like opens her mouth and she's like, are the mycelium coming out in that point?
Yeah. But I'm saying, like, we don't know how long she'd been infected.
Right. No. I get that, and I get. That's why I was saying, like, it's hard to know when that all happened. Yeah. But I don't know. Like, I just have a hard time believing society would fall apart that quickly. I don't know. Like, society fell apart really well. You know what I mean? Like, it fell apart perfectly in a lot of ways. Like, the thing I appreciate about Last of Us that this has over almost all the other zombie anything is the QZs exist. The world is not completely destroyed.
It's not great, but there is some structure.
Right. And like going as far as a lot of the zombie stuff goes, where it's like, nope, the world has completely broken down. Like, that for me is unrealistic. But this is a lot better way of approaching it, where it's like there's QZs, there are still people. The threat is there, but the threat isn't like you've said, we're gonna see real people being the real threat really quick. Yeah.
The people are the monsters.
Yeah, the people are the Walking Dead. Yeah. I know. I appreciate this episode. I'm excited to see where the show continues to go. Clearly, we're going to be moving outside of the cities, and we're going to be meeting new characters, and I'm excited. So
yep.
So we'll see. So on the next episode of Mushrooms and Men, we're going to be talking about the third episode of The Last of Us, titled Long, Long Time. So until then, you can find Yashar and I over at weirdingwaymedia.com, which is our podcast network that we put together for all the things that we work on, like this show and House of the Dragon, a little show we did called Game of Bros, where we talk all about what else? Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon. That's where you can find this show. That's where you can find that show. That's where you can find all the things that we work on. Like, rate, and review wherever you find the show. And we'll catch you on the next episode.